Welcome to this week's episode of The Savvy Author. My name is Clara Rose. I am the creator of the Be Savvy brand, and I'm your host today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you haven't been with us before, I just want to welcome you to the show and invite you to come back every week, and we talk about all of the things that are necessary to be a savvy author, and we would love for you to join us. And of course, if you're a regular, welcome back, my friend. So today we're going to talk about a topic that I've touched on a little bit, but not in depth. So it's one of the three phases of writing your book. And of course, the three phases of writing your book are the brainstorm blueprint, which is where we analyze and brainstorm and blueprint. So we're creating the right book, capturing all of your ideas, and outlining them into a structure before we start the process of writing your book. Or phase two, where we are creating or refining the actual content that goes into your book. So we write your book, getting those words onto paper. We edit your book because everyone needs an editor, my friend. And we format your book. We're getting ready to publish. Or the third phase, where we actually understand our options and get published, get the word out and plan our launch, and then of course have a plan for ongoing sales as we sell our book. Today we're going to focus on the second phase, at least part of the second phase of our book building process, and that is the writing and the editing, primarily the writing. So getting those words onto paper, and specifically we're going to talk about honing your voice. Now you may not have ever heard that terminology before. So you may have never heard someone say honing your voice as a writer. Crafting your message, you've heard me say a lot. I don't talk a lot about honing your voice. What is an author's voice? So an author's voice is just how they sound in the written word. Now, the way that we speak and the way that we write are not identical. So the things that we say when we're speaking don't necessarily translate well to the written word when we write a book. But we do want the book to sound like us, right? I think that's probably one of the greatest compliments that someone can get when they do a ghostwriting, which is where they actually write for you or write on your behalf, which I do a fair amount of that. It's not my primary target audience, but I do some ghostwriting. But to have somebody who you've written a book for, when their book is published, someone who knows them well says, this was like sitting right across the table from you, talking to you. That's the greatest, to me, the greatest compliment as a ghostwriter that I can have. Now, in the industry, ghostwriting is not necessarily always handled that way. In fact, some ghostwriters, everything that they write for someone doesn't even matter who the author is or the topic, they sound the same. They have the same voice. And that's just because the writer hasn't ever learned to capture the voice of someone besides themselves. After you've been writing for a lot of years, it's a natural tendency to sound like yourself, right? They've honed their voice, and that's great if you're the author and you're the one with your name in the book, but that's not great if someone else is the author with their name on the book. You want it to sound like them. Anyway, we're going to talk today not about ghostwriting, but about actually as a writer, how you can hone your voice so that your voice is easily recognizable to others. I like to use this example when I'm talking about honing your voice. Now, one of my favorite fiction authors is Og Mandino. If you've never read an Og Mandino book, you are missing out. He is not with us any longer, but Og had an amazing gift with storytelling. He could just paint a picture for you and just suck you right into his books in such an amazing way. I have read all of his books repeatedly, have them all on they're worn. They're literally so worn out. I should get new copies because they're just, my husband and I both read them frequently and we love them. So what Og does well is draws you in with the words that he uses, but they all sound like Og. Now, I would have loved to have met him in his life and to see how he sounded as a person compared to his books, but his books all feel like him. And that's what I'm talking about. When somebody writes something and it's just so clearly their work, you recognize their voice in the work. This is super important for somebody who, in the fiction world, I think that's important, but it's even more important in the nonfiction world, which of course is where I live with my clients and where all of my writing comes in. I write nonfiction. Most of my clients, of course, are business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are trying to create a book that they're going to use as a tool and use it in their business. Then it becomes super important that that book sounds like you. And today we're going to talk about just a few things around honing your voice as you craft your message so that you can sound like you in your book. And people who read your book feel like, I was listening to you, talk to me, instead of you, even though the ways we string words together are differently in the written word, I still want it to sound like you. All right, let's jump into our topic for the day. Your voice really does matter. So capturing your own words during the creative process, the creation process, is what we're talking about here. After a cooling period, you can read your words out loud and see if you can hear your own voice. And then ask somebody that is in your writing group or someone close to you who can read it and look for voice authenticity. So part of honing your craft is really learning to sound like you. Now you might be saying, Clara, what is a cooling period? If you've not heard that term before, that's all right. A cooling period is when you write something and then you set it aside. Now you can set it aside for a short amount of time, even a few hours, but I recommend at least an overnight cooling period. And really it's an opportunity for you to go back and read something that you've written, and it's not as likely that you're going to read what you think you wrote. Is when we're creating stuff, our brain is creating faster than our fingers are typing, even if you're like lightning fast. I type at a pretty good speed, but my brain is still kind of ahead of my fingers most of the time. And I will think that I wrote something, and when I go back after it's cooled off, it isn't exactly what I wrote. That's what makes the cooling period so important in your writing. It's like the first edit, if you will. It's that first look at with a little more objectiveness after it's cooled than when you've first written it. This is also where you're going to pick up things, words that you've left out, sometimes words that are transposed. The way that it came out your fingers isn't the same way that it was in your brain, those kinds of things. It's kind of step one of editing, self-editing, if you will, but it's a really important piece to honing and crafting your voice, honing your voice in your message. So if you're going to write a chapter or you're going to write whatever it is you're planning to write for the day, 500 words, whatever your habit is, write it, set it aside, work on something else, come back to it the next day. If you can give it a couple of days, that's even better. So when you come back after the cooling period and you read it out loud. That's when you're really going to notice if you've written something that you thought you wrote or you wrote something totally different. It's also an opportunity for you to hear how it might sound when somebody else reads it. And then, of course, when you pass it on to somebody else, you want to make sure you've been through the cooling process, gone back and looked at it, tightened it up, that first edit, and then pass it on to somebody. Hopefully you have a writer's group. If you're a serious writer, you probably do have a writer's group, or at the very least, a mastermind group or somebody who will read your work and point out something that you may not have seen. Plus, they're going to be listening for your voice if you instruct them to do so. Say, hey, I'm looking for authenticity here, so see if this sounds like me. And they can give you some great feedback for that, usually. Okay. Let's talk about authenticity matters. Authenticity is just being true to who you are. And true authenticity is the foundation of any healthy brand, reputation, company, and the same is true for you as an author. So your voice should be obvious in your written word, and your book should sound authentically like you. Now, fake is obvious, perhaps not at first, but time will really reveal the truth about that. So be strategic and intentional in matters of authenticity. So what do I mean by fake? So what I mean by fake is somebody, especially a newer writer, can have this tendency, if they're an avid reader, a voracious reader. I love to read. I read all the time. If you read someone's work repeatedly, it can, and you're a newer writer, it can be tempting to sound like the person that you love so much. You love their style. But if it isn't true to who you are, it's going to be noticeable. I use this example from my own life when I was a child, well, a teenager, let's say, young teenager. My dad, a brilliant man, but he was a contractor, fisherman, not necessarily a literary person, but a really smart person. We were having a conversation one day, and he was always just smarter than me. He could always best me in that way. Having a conversation, and I asked him a question. He said, "Owing to an uncertainty, I hesitate to ascertain." And I'm like, did a double take? And I'm like, what? You hesitate to ascertain? And I was just young enough that I was super impressed by the terminology, but I recognized immediately that didn't sound like him. That wasn't authentic to him. That was very fake sounding when it came. It was funny, kind of, but it didn't sound like him. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. If it doesn't sound like you when you're speaking it, if it's not something that you would say in a way that you would say it, it's not real. It's not authentic. It's kind of fake. And that's what I'm talking about. So it's easy to do in passing when you're speaking to somebody, but in writing, you need to be super intentional that you're not trying to sound like someone else, especially if it means using large words when regular everyday words are going to get the point across so much more easily. And people are going to connect with it because it sounds like you versus sounding like you. I don't even know where he got that. I'm sure somebody famous probably said that, and my dad was passing it on to me. I think because he knew that I loved words. I've loved words. I love it when people use words that are unique or different, and it surprises me. I love that. But in your writing, we don't want to see that. If you wouldn't say it, it doesn't go in your book. All right, let's move on. Words have power. So the example with my dad is a good example because those words had power. Those words meant something and impacted me. And the written and spoken word can have a lasting impact. So when you craft your message, you want to craft it carefully so that you're impacting the world in the way that you would like. Of course, this is a famous saying. People will always remember how you made them feel. And it is a famous saying because it is actually true. People will remember how you made them feel. They may not exactly remember the words that you used, not exactly verbatim, but the feeling, they will remember that. And then, of course, remember that mediums like video and the printed word, those can last forever. Your book is a legacy, and future generations will likely be reading your words. At least that is the goal as an author, is that your book will be around forever. So as long as your book is in print, future generations will have the opportunity to purchase your book and to read it. And beyond that, this this book right here, unless for some reason it is destroyed, thrown away, whatever happens physically to this book, if nothing physically ever happens to make this go away, this is going to stand the test of time for a lot of years. So the words that you write and you put into print and put out to the world matter. The words that you use do have power. They have power to influence. They have power to tear people down. They have power to build people up. So there's a great amount of responsibility that comes from putting words in print. Once you've said them, you can't take them back either, right? They're out there, but people may soon forget what it was that you said. Perhaps not how it made them feel, but the words that you said. But when you put it in print, it is a forever thing. So be sure that you're putting your best foot forward and that it sounds authentically like you and you're using your word power for good and not evil. Okay, that one was a little dramatic, but you get my point. All right, let's move on. Here's where I would like for you to start. You're saying, all right, Clara, I'm convinced I need to hone my voice as I craft my message. Start here. Find your writing voice by discovering your personal prose. Now, that's just the verbiage that you frequently use or that you would like to have associated with you. You're going to build a bank of power words that you can draw from as you write. So intentionally weave those words into your work as you're creating. So you'll want to post those words near your chosen creative space, wherever it is that you would like to do your writing or you intend to do your writing, so you can glance at them as needed. Now, there's actually some science behind this, so I'm not just pulling this out of the air. Once you've created your bank of power words and you're going to be using them in your writing, post them near your computer, wherever it is that you are going to sit down and do your writing. Or it doesn't have to be a computer. If you're going to handwrite, I still have some clients who like to handwrite first. It's more work because then you have to, of course, make that digital somehow, somewhere down the road. You have to type it up. I prefer to type from the get-go, but that's completely up to you, your choice as a creative person. So at my computer, my power words are on the wall beside me. So here's the science behind it. If you're left-handed, you want to put them over here, because even when you're not looking at them, apparently the science says that your brain is still going to see them. If you're right-handed, you want them over here on the right. Now, if your office doesn't work well for that, just post them somewhere close to your computer is good enough as far as I'm concerned, because my goal is for you to reference them as you're writing. So when you have this bank of power words, these are the words that I like to use that sound like me, or here's the words that I would like to be associated with my brand or my writing style, my voice, if you will. I want those all to be on this bank of power words, this block of words. You can separate them out into verbs and adjectives and nouns if you would like. Or you can just run them all together and scan them whenever you're feeling like, how do I say this? I'm not stuck necessarily, but how can I best say this so that it sounds like me? You can glance over at your little bank of power words and you have some words to pull from. That's just a process of getting used to, it's a habit, getting used to referring to those and saying, yeah, I'm on track. I'm sounding like me. And not falling victim to the idea that I need to sound smart, I need to sound intellectual, I need to sound smarter than I am maybe, so I'm going to use words that I either wouldn't normally use or that I don't have a good grasp on their meaning. I see it frequently when I'm working with first-time authors especially, a misuse of words. So if you're not 100% sure of how the word is used, grab a thesaurus, right? Actually, I have a thesaurus on my phone, a dictionary and thesaurus, because I use my thesaurus regularly for coming up with different words. Like if you're writing in a sentence and you have repeated the same word in that paragraph a couple of times, I'm looking for a different word for one of those. Going to mean the same thing, but we don't want to repeat the same word. I've chosen this, I've chosen that, I've chosen this. Find another word for one of those chosens so that there's not that repetitive sound. And that will naturally sound a little more intelligent, a little more like have a broader language grasp, if you will. So that's a great use for a thesaurus. So grab your thesaurus, find some words that you would like to use and be associated with you, but not all brand new words, because we still want to sound like you. remember, the ultimate goal is that that person that you sit down with when they read your book says, it was like having a conversation with you. So that's where you're going to start. When we're talking about honing a voice so that you can craft your message for the world, start with that bank of power words. Maybe once you've created that bank of power words, go to somebody that you know and let them read the bank of power words and say, hey, I'm working on honing my craft. I'm honing my voice. I'm trying to stay really authentic to who I am. Would you read this bank of power words and tell me if any of these don't sound like me? Does this ring true? Does this feel authentic? You know me. This is also a great thing to do in your writers group. And if you do not have a writers group, I highly encourage you to find one. Those are the people who are going, they come together as a group. Some of them meet monthly, some will meet weekly. Whatever works for your schedule, find one to join and show up and participate. Be there for them, and they will be there for you. This is where you can give them chapters, paragraphs, or your bank of power words and say, hey, I'm working on this. Would you take a moment and give me your opinion? And I promise you, it is a safe space. This is where your people are hanging out. They also are crafting their message to the world. They also care about honing their voice and staying authentic to who they are. If they haven't been taught them, here's your opportunity to say, hey, here's how your book is going to be amazing. You're going to be a better writer if you do this. And then you have an opportunity to make a difference in their writing journey as well. Find one of them on Facebook. Sometimes local libraries will have writers groups. Wherever you can find one to plug into, I promise you it's going to be time well spent on your journey as a writer or your journey to becoming an author. Now, if you are not planning a long-term or long-term stint as an author, or writing isn't something that you intend to do repeatedly, you don't have a series in mind, I think it's probably less important that you're honing your voice. But if you're writing your book for your audience, we want you to sound like you in your book. If you're also writing blog posts, or you're writing articles, or even your social media posts, all of those things are writing. All of that is important when it comes to honing your voice. If you're writing a fiction book and it's a one-off, it's probably a little bit less important. But then you're not my ideal client, and you are probably not here listening to me. These things are also less true for a writer of children's books. Children's books are pulled together differently. You're speaking to a different audience, and you're either rhyming or it's just done differently. So it's less important to hone your voice as a children's writer, if you will. Now, that said, Mercer Mayer does a wonderful job with children's books that all sound the same in tone. They have, the Bernstein Bears, all those great classics. They do have some repetitive nature to them, and you can hear the author's voice in them for sure. I'm just saying it's not quite as important. And then, of course, fiction writers who are doing a variety of genres. You're not just writing in one genre. It doesn't have to cross over to your other genre quite as much. But okay, enough about that for today. Suffice it to say, honing your voice, capturing your voice in your message is important for most of us as writers. And I encourage you to start with that bank of power words. And then, of course, if you feel like you need a little more help in this department or any of the other phases of the development and the building of your book, we have some help for you, and that is our Savvy Author Mentorship Program. Now, right now it is closed, but we have a waiting list that you can jump on. But let me tell you really quickly before we run out of time what it is that you will get when you become a member of the mentorship program. First of all, we're going to go through your brainstorm and blueprint. Remember, that was the first phase. We want to find out what it is that you're going to say and how you're going to say it and get it into an outline. And then we work on step 2, which is your writing and accountability. Nothing replaces getting your hiney in the seat and actually getting the writing done. And then accountability becomes key. You have somebody holding your feet to the fire, and bonus, you have a built-in writers group as well. We just talked extensively about the importance of a writers group. Then, of course, editing and formatting. We're going to give you the basics of all of those and point you in the right direction for professional help on the editing. We're going to talk through your publishing and launching and put together a plan for publishing and launching, because it doesn't just happen on its own, my friend. And then, of course, promoting and selling, which also does not just happen on its own. You need to have a plan in place so that that happens. There's a whole bunch of other things that I could go into about this program, but I just want to give you just the basics. It is a mentoring program, and it's the first of its kind that gives you a full blueprint for creating a successful book, plus education, plus the accountability to actually get it done. There's a seasoned literary consultant and editor to guide you every step of the way. No more wondering where to start or writing yourself into a corner or half-finished manuscript that you have no idea how to finish. We teach you everything you need to know about front matter, back matter, core content, structure, all of those pieces, and then, of course, how to get your book done, get it out to the world, and then the accountability, of course, being built into every step along the way, because it really does matter. No matter where you are in your journey, the Savvy Author Mentoring Program can help you to plan, write, publish, and launch your book for the world. If you think, yes, Clara, that is for me, I'm going to invite you to jump on our wait list. So the doors are closed currently for the current session, but fall session will be happening in the fall, and you can get on the waiting list right now at clararose.com/wait list. All right, my friends, we are out of time for today, but thank you for coming and joining me once again. I look forward to seeing you next week, where we talk about what it takes to be a savvy author. See you next week.